Let's pray. Father, we thank you for this beautiful morning. We thank you for each and every one that's here, Lord. I pray that if there's any more on their way, that you would give them traveling mercies and bring them safely. I pray, Lord, that I would bless those that are listening online as well. I thank you for the opportunity to share our ministry and our vision. And I just ask you, Lord, to bless all that takes place in Sunday school. And then in the service, Lord, I just ask you to bless the guest pastor as he speaks. May it all be for your honor and glory. And we just give you honor and glory and praise in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, I'm going to be talking about our trip to Romania and Ukraine. Back in February, when the Russians started threatening, and then when they invaded Ukraine, Grace and I started praying about what God would have us to do, and we felt that there's lots of people are seeking money to send to Ukraine, but we felt that God wanted us to have a more personal part in that, and we felt that He was calling us to go to Romania, and we started looking for a place to serve. God gave us in Isaiah 52:7, how beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace, that bringeth good tidings of good, that publisheth salvation, that saith unto Zion, thy God reigneth. We wanted to do relief for the Ukrainians, but we also wanted to share the gospel. We prayed, we looked, we couldn't find. We started looking at Baptist ministries, and we couldn't find any Baptist ministries that were recruiting workers. There's a lot of them that are collecting funds and sending funds to organizations that are already on the ground in Ukraine, but there weren't any that were actually seeking volunteers to go and serve. So we broadened our search, and we did find a non-denominational missions group called a Jesus Mission. And although we have many differences as far as their doctrinal position, but they were actually seeking volunteers, actually seeking workers, so we joined them. If I can get this, okay, now it's working up here. On the 4th of May, we arrived in Cluj-Napoca, which is the short name is Cluj, which is in northwestern Romania in Transylvania, and has a population of about 300,000. And a lot of refugees are passing through Cluj. We participated with a Jesus Mission, and they partnered with this church that you see, the black sign, Deo Gloria, which means glory to God. It's a Bible church, and the translation is there of the sign. But they're very conservative in their doctrine. They're more aligned with Baptists, except in their actual worship services are more contemporary, but their doctrine is very conservative. So we worked with them, and our first day we came right from the airport to Deo Gloria, and we had an orientation. They told us a lot of things. They said don't take pictures. They said be very careful around the people because they're very frightened and nervous, and have to be very sensitive to their needs. Don't publish anything that has pictures of the people. Don't take pictures of faces. If you take a picture, it should be their backs, and a lot of things that they felt were important for us to know. And we were given our first traditional Romanian meal of pizza. So from there we went to this house, which is called Clouds Villa. It's a rental property that the Jesus Mission rented, and we stayed there with all the volunteers. We didn't really fit in well. AJM, a Jesus Mission, is a pretty liberal missions group, and we felt that some of them had one foot, in Jesus and one foot in the world, and we were very uncomfortable there. But it was a good place for us to stay, and we had our own room, and we shared a bath. The others, the singles, shared rooms, and they also shared beds. Guys with guys and girls with girls, but two strangers sleeping in a double bed together is just not my cup of tea. I didn't think that was a very good thing to do, but that's how they did it.
That's what they did in the colonial days.
Well, and what they really needed was a house mother. But anyway, they needed some guidance. The next day we went back to Deo Gloria and we prepared for this first group of refugees. They all came from the Kharkiv area in eastern Ukraine. Kharkiv is, as we speak, the Ukrainians are taking back the Kharkiv area and driving the Russians out, but it was under Russian control for some time. This picture actually shows their last day with us. They were getting ready to load onto the buses to go on to Germany. And Christian, who's an elder at Deo Gloria, was praying for them. You have to understand, most of these people speak Russian. They don't speak English. Some of them speak Ukrainian, but those two languages are pretty similar, Ukrainian and Russian. So there has to be a translator. And I didn't speak Pug either, so I didn't get to talk to the dog. But we talked to them as best we could. We used Google Translate on our cell phones. Grace was very good at communicating with the women. We spent time with the children. Most of the people who come are women and children. They're single mothers, or not single mothers, but they're mothers with children that are separated from their husbands, fathers. Any man between the ages of 18 and 60 cannot leave Ukraine. They have to stay to be called up in case they need them in the war. So a lot of them left somebody behind, and they're all very worried about the people they left behind, which is very understandable. And the first night they came, we basically gave them a meal, gave them a place to sleep, and spent some time. We sat down and ate with them and talked to them as best we could. There were a couple who spoke English, but for the most part, we didn't really have a good chance to communicate the first night. And they were all tired and they wanted to go to bed. So we left them and then we came back the next day. One of the things that they did was they put up a big strip of craft paper on the wall and they allowed them to write things on the craft paper. And one of the mothers wrote Slava Ukraine in Russian, and which means glory to Ukraine. Now you have to understand, these are Russian-speaking Ukrainians who Putin has sworn to liberate from Ukraine, and the only thing they want to be liberated from is Putin. So I didn't hear anybody say that they love Putin or that they thought Putin was right. They pretty much hate Putin, and by extension, they hate the Russians at this point. Russia has ruined their relationship with the nation of Ukraine, and it's just become really, really ugly. I gotta turn my page here. This was one of my first opportunities to drive in Ukraine. One of the reasons they wanted us to come there is because I have experience driving a manual transmission, a stick shift. Most Americans can't, and there are very, very, very few automatic transmissions in Romania or Ukraine. Everything's manual still. So they needed drivers. And we went around and we picked up kids for the refugee children's ministry. Some of the refugees stayed in Romania. A lot of them went on to Germany or England or Spain or wherever they could find a place to settle more permanently. But a lot of them stayed in Romania because their desire is to go home. They showed us pictures a lot of times and they don't have a home to go home to except a pile of rubble, but they still want to go home. That's in their heart. They want to go home. Romania is home, not Germany or wherever. This is a lady. We took the kids to the park at least once a week, and this lady Tanya was with her grandchildren. 3 of her grandchildren stayed with her in Cluj. Her daughter and her older grandchildren went on to Germany, but she wanted to stay because her husband and her son-in-law are fighting in Ukraine, and she wants to go back. It's just in her heart to be home. And, she misses her husband and she wants to be with him. She feels that's her place. Right now she can't. She showed us pictures of her home and she has no home. It's just a pile of burned out rubble. Everything was bombed. And we did have opportunities to present the gospel. Now this little girl, Arisha, spoke English, and the tract she's reading is in English. We also had tracts in Russian, and virtually every refugee we met, I think I may have said it already, but they all speak Russian. They don't speak Ukrainian, they speak Russian. Of course, you understand that Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union since World War II, so it's understandable that they were forced to learn Russian. But we were able to, using Google Translate, and we had some Ukrainian language tracts which they could read. The languages are very similar. I was told that the Ukrainian language is a softer version of the Russian language. Russian's a very, I don't want to say harsh, it's a very strong language. It's not a Romance language for sure. We shared the best we could. We left everybody that came through, we gave them a wristband or a bracelet with the colors on it, and we gave them the Ukrainian language tract that has the colors explanation, the gospel tract, so that they at least were given the gospel. We didn't always get to talk to them. We did use Google Translate, and we had sign language, and sometimes we could find somebody to talk for us, and we were able to share sometimes, but for the most part, we just had to trust that we were planting a seed and that the gospel was being carried with them when they left. Grace especially made a connection with a lot of the ladies. You all know how Grace is, and she made a lot of friends. I didn't get to talk to very many men because there just weren't very many men there. And the men are not as open as the ladies are, but the ladies, especially with children, were grateful to have somebody to talk to and to have some encouragement and to think that there's hope beyond what's going on in their country right now. And Grace spent some time with a lot of different people and talked to them. And these are just some of the ladies. And you notice, like, we have pictures with faces. The first day, they told us don't take pictures, don't be very careful talking to them. And we learned very quickly that it's okay to take pictures. We always asked before we took pictures, and they love to have their pictures taken. Now, we don't publish names, we don't publish locations. We put some stuff on social media, but nothing with any identifiers on it. And these people are safe because they're not in Ukraine now. So it wasn't a problem for us to take pictures. And there are some places where we didn't take pictures. This man is Daniel Samara. Believe it or not, we met Daniel on the boardwalk in Ocean City. He's a Romanian missionary. Last summer he came to Ocean City to evangelize on the boardwalk. And he invited us to come see him in Bucharest in Romania. Little did we know, but never thought that would happen. But Daniel told us of some missions opportunities, and he told us about a pastor that has a church in Western Ukraine and a family there that had adopted some children, and he wanted us to go visit them. And I'll tell you more about that a little later. We besides doing kids ministry when there were no refugees passing through, we also did some shopping. We took the trucks and we went to the supermarket, and in this picture we actually bought out their entire stock of infant formula, and it all goes to Ukraine because they can't get it in Ukraine. I've heard there's a problem with formula here in the U.S. because the factory shut down, but in Ukraine everything's been bombed and there's no supplies getting in. The other picture shows us loading one of the vans. We did make a relief convoy drive into Ukraine, and this is one of the vans that we loaded up. This van probably has about 1.5 tons of food in it. The smaller one had a ton. It's all based on weight. They don't look very full, but there's a lot of beans and rice and heavy stuff in the bottom, so it has to be based on weight because the roads are atrocious and you can't overload them or they'll break down. So we loaded 5 vans. The night before we left, this is at the house where we stayed, and this is the group praying, laying hands on all the drivers and praying, because the next morning at 6:30 in the morning, we left for Ukraine. I said 6:30, it was actually 4:30. I have it in my notes. We left at 4:30 in the morning to head for the border, which is 6 hours away. We drove 6 hours. We were 3rd place in the convoy. There are 4 vans like this, and then there was what they called the mom van, which is basically a minivan. It was loaded with canned meat. Not the most attractive kind of meat. It was like liver pate. I don't know, or not liver, but pork pate. It was like pork paste. I don't know, but it was meat, so it was protein. And this other picture shows us at the border crossing. That says welcome. Well, it says it in English there. It says welcome to Ukraine. So I guess you can all read that. It took us 6 hours to get to the border. It took us 2 hours to cross the border. Everybody wants something. They want a bribe. They want cigarettes. They want chocolates. They want money. Whatever. It takes a while to get through. And most of that's on the Romanian side, not the Ukrainians. Most of it's the Romanians wanting something. There's a lot of corruption in Eastern Europe still.
Yeah. One of the food give outs, is that like a hot dog there?
I'm coming to that. I actually changed slides a little too soon. When we went into Ukraine, in one of my letters I shared that we had to smuggle diesel fuel. There is no diesel fuel to be bought in Ukraine anywhere. All the vans were diesels. And we brought 25 of those 20-liter cans of diesel buried in the load because the Romanians won't let you bring, they only allow you to take 10 liters across the border. So 25 times 20 is a little bit more than 10 liters, whatever that number is.
They won't let you bring fuel into the country?
They won't let you bring it out of Romania. They want you to pay, is what it amounts to. So we put it in the middle of the load and we buried it. This is something it's certainly illegal, but it's something that they do every trip. And we also buried carrots and cabbages in the middle of the load because they won't let you bring produce either. So in one of our letters, I said that I became a carrot smuggler. So we did smuggle carrots and cabbage, and we smuggled diesel fuel. Not with any evil intent. We didn't make any money off of it, but yeah. And this, John, we stopped at a gas station along the way and pulled around behind it to be discreet about refueling. The fuel came from our load. We had to unload the truck and get the fuel out and refuel because you can't buy any. And while we were there, we gave the gas station a little business. We went and had lunch. We had gourmet gas station hot dogs and 7-Ups, which was about all they had to sell.
Sushi.
No sushi. No, they weren't quite that sophisticated. But this is what we saw after we got closer. The first day we stayed in a hotel, and then we went on the second day to Mykolaiv, which is in eastern Ukraine. And once you get down on the coast, down there on the Black Sea, this is what you see. There's tank traps and barricades and warning signs, and this is like a little bunker down here at the bottom on the other side there. And some of them were unmanned, some of them are just to slow people down, some of them are manned by soldiers. And we were warned not to have any cameras or phones out when we passed through the ones that were manned because we might lose if you take pictures. Now those are very sensitive places and they don't want their pictures posted, so they don't allow any photos.
Throw it. Yeah.
Well, they probably keep it, but anyway, every time we came to a manned checkpoint with soldiers, they would check the first van's passports and papers and see it, and he had the paperwork for the shipment for the load. And as soon as they saw who we were and what we were doing, the rest of us, they just waved us through. They didn't check our papers, or they were very, very kind to us and let us go through. So they were the Ukrainians are very appreciative of what's happening with the relief efforts there. And the first picture there is Mykolaiv. This was our arrival in Mykolaiv. We crossed the bay there and came into the city. The building is the church. It doesn't look like a church. In fact, all of the non-Orthodox churches that we encountered in Romania and Ukraine are very discreet. They don't put up big signs or Orthodoxy has pretty much domination in those countries, and they don't like competition. So the churches, in order to not draw the wrath of the Orthodox Church, are very low key. They don't put big signs up. And the picture on the right, this is the only church I've ever visited that had a bomb shelter under the kitchen. That's the entrance to their bomb shelter.
Was it recently built? Or?
I assume that it was built. I think the building is relatively recent, but I assume, they've been fighting since the Russians seized Crimea in 2014. So there's been conflict there for a long time. The Russian invasion is something new, but the southern and eastern parts of Ukraine have been under a lot of tension for a long time. So it's probably a few years old, but I'm sure it's relatively recent. These are, when we went into Ukraine, we asked to go with the convoy, and I offered to drive, and Grace can't drive, so normally they wouldn't let a non-driver go. But she told them she had a mission. Before we left, the pastor's wife in Pocomoke City gave her some money and asked her to be a blessing to Ukrainian pastor's wife. So we found the picture on the right there. Venera is on the right in the picture, and her sister Nina is on the left, and Grace is in the middle. Venera is the wife of the pastor of one of the churches we delivered food to. And Grace was able to bless her with some money. And when Grace gave her money, she got tears because they don't have anything. I mean, they're living pretty much hand to mouth. They don't. The city has substituted seawater in their city water supply because they can't get fresh water because the Russians destroyed the system. So, but they have salt water for flushing and that kind of things. But they don't have fresh water. Everything they have to go to a dug well someplace, or they have to bring it in, and it's so hard. There's no fuel to transport anything. So life is hard. I mean, their lives are just day to day. They never know from one day to the next what's going to happen. The other lady with Grace is Natalia. She was at the first church we visited, which the picture I showed you was the first church. Natalia is not the pastor's wife. The pastor of that church is an army chaplain, and he's not there a lot. So Natalia is kind of the person that, she's the glue that holds it all together, and she does it pretty much everything in the church. And Grace was able to bless her with some money too. And again, they're so grateful. They're so thankful because they don't have money coming in. They don't have jobs, and they don't know where the next money is coming from. So they were very thankful to Grace and to the pastor's wife. And Venera, the wife of Pastor Son. This picture on the right there, that's Pastor Son and Venera on his left, and then her sister, and that's Pastor Venera's son, Dima. His wife and children are in England. They were fortunate enough to get out before it was too late. This is our convoy unloading the truck. See, there's the carrots and the cabbage being put in their garage. And Pastor Son has two other churches closer to the Russian front that he ministers to, and he transports the food to them and distributes it. They put it all in bags and hand out bags of food to the people because the people don't have much. But as little as they have, they insisted that we have dinner with them. So we had some fellowship, and then we had some fellowship. This is the group from all the drivers. There were 5 vans, so there were 10 of us that drove. In case you don't know, borscht is the national dish of Ukraine, and everywhere you go, you get a bowl of borscht, which is a soup, and then you get rice or whatever else they have.
Is it good?
It was good. And interestingly enough, when we arrived at the first church, the first thing we did, we had to go inside and have a bowl of borscht. And then we went and delivered the food to the other church. And as soon as we got to the other church, they told us as soon as we're unloaded, we have to stay for dinner. So we ate twice, and so we were full.
So borscht means soup, right?
I don't know if that actually translates, but it is a soup. Somebody that's a culinary artist will have to answer that for you. Okay. I've been talking without my notes, so I'm way ahead of myself here. I mean, I'm not ahead of myself, I'm behind in my notes. Okay, we went back to that first house that I showed you. We went back there to spend the night because we were going to leave to go home the next morning. And this is the kitchen of that church. We got there, and at 9 o'clock, curfew is set. So we had to be indoors with the windows shut and the lights off at 9 o'clock. And at 9 o'clock is when the shelling starts. Now, we weren't being shelled directly where we were, but we could hear the shells landing not all that far from us. You know, it was like thunder in the distance. They were close enough that we could hear every one of them hit coming from the Russians. The church was probably 25 miles from the Russian lines, so we weren't right on the front. But this picture, when the shelling started, the church started singing and worshiping, and they never stopped. They sang praise and worshiped until the shelling stopped. Grace took this picture. We were leaving at 5:30 in the morning, so I went to bed and slept. I couldn't stay up all night and still drive because we had a 16-hour drive the next day. So Grace sat and listened to part of the worship service, but this is their answer to the Russians. Is when we were talking to Pastor Son's wife Venera, she told us that when the shelling starts, their house is maybe 5 miles from the first one. And when we went to their house and their house church, she said that she sits down between the kitchen windows, which it's a concrete wall, so that's the safest place. The window won't explode and hit her. And she said she cries and prays for the people until the shelling stops. So you know, they're very God-fearing Christian people that have stepped up to take the place of other agencies that are not doing it, because the big agencies like the Red Cross and all of those, they won't go to Mykolaiv because they say it's too dangerous. They go to Kyiv and they go to other cities, but they won't go to the front because they say it's too dangerous.
So they don't go down to the bomb shelter unless they're sleeping, probably.
Well, when we were there, the men slept in the bomb shelter. I don't think they sleep in the bomb shelter. Normally, if we weren't there, they would all just be there worshiping anyway. So
they don't really use the bomb shelter.
Well, they do if it gets closed. And right now, Mykolaiv is under Russian direct hit. The city's taking direct hits from the Russians. The Russians are firing missiles from the Black Sea to terrorize the people.
Yeah. Within hearing range, I would think that'd be close enough for me to go down the bomb shelter.
We went on their lead, and I slept on the third floor, and you know, God gave me perfect peace because I slept through it all. I heard it when I laid down, and I went to sleep, and I slept the whole night it didn't bother me. Just I couldn't do anything about it, and you know, God gave me the peace to accept it, so I just went to sleep. The guys that I was up there with complained about my snoring, but apparently they stayed awake because they heard my snoring. Not that I snore.
I have the same problem.
Okay, this picture that's up there now, I told you earlier that Daniel Samara told us about a pastor that was in Ukraine and that he wanted us to go meet him and the other family. This is the Sigetu Marmatai. This is the bridge across the river to go into Ukraine. That's the border crossing. It's a pretty rickety bridge. I did see some cars drive across it, but trucks can't cross this crossing at all because there's supposed to be a footbridge over here, but half of it's missing, so you have to walk in the road. It's in pretty bad shape. That's not relevant, but I just thought it was interesting. But anyway, we went to meet Pastor Yuri across this bridge. We walked across the bridge, and then he came and picked us up and took us to his church. This is his church. The little sign on the corner, which is, you can't really see it, but it's right up here in the corner. Are you seeing my mouse?
Blue and white.
Yeah, there's a little. This sign is actually down there under the awning on the left side of the church, and it says House of Prayer and the address. That's the only thing that identifies it as a church. But this is actually a Baptist church. It took us to the last week we were there to go to a Baptist church. We couldn't find one for the longest time. And now this is Pastor Yuri and his wife Gloria, and I'm not going to try to read that church name to you. That's the full title of the church. And the town is Badevlia. That's the best I can do. This picture was taken on Easter Sunday. This is a combination of church family and refugees. The church is very nice inside, but they, you know, from better times, I'm sure, because they don't have much right now. They struggle to feed the refugees that are staying in the church. And the other picture is Michael Misha. He was my translator. Michael's from Kyiv. and he lives in the church as a refugee because he has no home to go back to, and he has no place else to go, and he's not allowed to leave Ukraine. So he's living in the church right now. Michael's not the best at English. His English is certainly better than my Russian, but he helped me translate. So Pastor Yuri asked me to share our testimony, our story, while we were there, and it took us a long time because we used Google Translate, and it was fun. But I said the least in the most amount of time, just because of one sentence at a time, and then translating it and trying to make everybody understand, and then him saying it again in Russian. It took a while. These are some of the refugees that are living at the church. Again, that's the picture on the right. That's Pastor Yuri and Gloria, and Michael and his mother it would be the right side of that picture. Pastor on the left is Pastor Yuri and Gloria. And the lady in the middle came to me specifically and asked me to pray for her husband, because her husband is somewhere fighting in the east in Ukraine, and she doesn't have good communication with him. She doesn't know where he is. She just knows he's fighting. As far as she knows, he's still alive, but she can't even be sure of that. And the chair, that's their furniture. That's what, they have a chair, and there's this room where we're sitting, there's a sofa there. And they sleep on air mattresses in the basement, in the bottom of the church. They don't have any furniture, and they really need help with that. The church doesn't have money to provide those things. And the next slide, he also told us about Wilhelm and Elena. They have 7 kids. They had 3 kids of their own, and then they went to Kharkiv to adopt 2 children. Just as the war was starting back in February, and they came home with 4. They adopted 4 children. Samuel has cerebral palsy. He has a mild case of cerebral palsy. He's one of the orphans, and he needs medical care. And Dominica is slow learner, I guess, would be the best thing. She's not really handicapped, but she's kind of a slow learner, and they have to get special counseling and special care for them. And Gloria was adopted, and Nathan was adopted. And Nathan and Gloria are brother and sister. I think were they twins?
Gloria is their biological brother.
Emma's the adopted one? I don't know. Anyway, 4 of them were adopted, and 3 of them are their natural children. So they went from 3 children to 7 in the blink of an eye. And their house, the picture you can see, there's not a lot of furniture in their house. The house was built by an architect for them because of what they did. He blessed them with a house, but the house is not finished. Inside the house, there are only 2 doors. There's one on the master bedroom and one on the bathroom. The rest of the house has no doors because they didn't have money to finish it. And also, all of the children are sleeping on the floor because they have no beds. They have no furniture. So Grace and I feel that we have unfinished business because we really feel it in our hearts that we need to go back and bless these people. We've set a goal to raise $5,000 so that we can go and buy furniture. I would love to fix the house for them, but the cost of materials there and the lack of materials makes that impossible. But at least we can buy them some furniture and give them a little bit of comfort in their lives. And they also need food. When we went to Wilhelm and Elena's house after church and had lunch, and they served us chicken legs with rice, and they had soy sauce and some little pickles, like pickled vegetables, and that's all they had. I mean, they didn't have a lot of food. We know that they sacrificed to feed us because that's hospitality says you have to do that. But before we left, Grace and I had put a $100 bill in each of our wallets when we left the States, and they were just sitting in the back of our wallets, and I gave one to Pastor Yuri, and she gave the other to Elena. And Elena started crying because she knew that was food. And right now they actually have gone to Switzerland to take the 2 kids with medical issues. They had to take them to Switzerland for care. So I'm sure that that's another big expense that they can't afford. But anyway, Grace and I have set a goal to go and help them and to bless them. And we're hoping to, we're looking at different options and places we can go and share the gospel while we're there. Pastor Yuri's having a neighborhood evangelism during August, and there's a campus crusade group in Bucharest that's doing summer camps for the Ukrainian refugees, and we can go to either of those. We haven't exactly figured it all out, but our target is to go back in August and spend the month of August in Ukraine, doing whatever God has us to do. And that was our last weekend in Romania and Ukraine, and this is just a picture I took from the air as we were getting close to Munich on our way back. That's Germany. Germany is a beautiful country, but we didn't get to. We only got to see it from 35,000 feet. So, and the airport. But that was our return. Do I have any time? Do I have time for questions?
3 to 4 minutes.
Okay. Anybody have a question? Anything I didn't tell you or that you want to know? Nobody? Yes, sir.
You mentioned that Romania doesn't allow fuel to go in and was asking for bribes going across. Does that indicate that Romania doesn't really support Ukraine well?
I don't think it's Romania. I think it's the low-level bureaucrats at the border that want to make a buck.
Or was it, do they charge export tax?
Well, that's probably part of it. The carrots and cabbages, I have no clue unless there's pest control things. I don't know. But the fuel, I'm sure there's a money issue involved. But the people in Ukraine can't get fuel. So we didn't feel guilty about smuggling diesel fuel, because that was for us to go and come back. Because it took all of that for us to go to Mykolaiv and come back.
Well, is there shortages in the surrounding countries?
Of fuel?
Yeah, because there's.
No, it's expensive, but it's not. There's no lack of it.
How much is it?
About 25 years ago, my former church, 25, 30 years ago, did a lot of missionary work in Romania. And at that time, Romania was about the poorest nation in Europe. Most of the farmers were still using horses instead of any kind of tractors. I mean, they didn't have tractors. They had mules and horses and maybe an ox or two. And that was all they had to farm with in Romania. So, it might be an old fact that so many of them had such a hard time that they're rather corrupt.
Well, I think it's true of developing countries in general that there is corruption.
Oh, I'm sure that actually.
If you think about,
it's probably true for most of Eastern Europe. It was at that time Romania was one of the few places we could go to.
yeah. Well, Moldova, which is at some point in its history was part of Romania, is now supposedly the poorest country in Europe.
Right. Yeah.
That or Albania, But the Moldovans, when we came back through Moldova, and they're more corrupt than the Romanians. I mean, corruption's is pandemic, whatever the word I'm trying to say. It's just part of their culture. I'm sure that the people at the border are poorly paid. Romania is still a poor country. All the things you mentioned, the horse-drawn wagons, and they're still stacking hay with a post, and hay stacked around a post, and they're still doing that in a lot of places in Romania. There are big modern farms with big tractors and all that, but that's not the peasantry, as they say, are still living pretty much, and you still see the gypsies with their wagons. And, Romania is a country of huge contrast. There's a lot of really poor people there. I heard somebody start.
I just wanted to know, how much was the diesel here?
Diesel fuel was $7. I'm going to have to do some math. It was almost 8 lei per liter, and 8 lei is about $2. So it's close to $8 a gallon. At that time, I don't know what it is now, but at that time it was $7 and something a gallon.
You get more miles per gallon on diesel.
Didn't seem like we were getting very good. Of course, we were driving way too fast, and it was kind of crazy. But it is what it is. Europe's always had higher fuel prices than America has because they import everything. Europe has no oil fields, they do some. England has oil fields, but
Do I have any kind of security with that?
no, we didn't have any security when we arrived at the first church. Three of the vans went on to another location, and the Army chaplain was there, and he asked them if they had body armor, and they didn't, and they went anyway. And we stayed in Mykolaiv and went to the local house church there in Mykolaiv. Now when they go, we still have contact with that group, and now when they go, they wear body armor just because it's heated up and it's more dangerous now than it was then. We didn't see anything that threatened us more than the driving going there, because we drove way too fast on some horrible roads, and I was more worried about, I wasn't really worried, but it crossed my mind that we were probably in greater danger getting there than we were being there, just because of the roads and the driving. We were in a convoy, and the front driver, we had walkie-talkies, and the first driver would pass a truck or whatever on the road, and he'd go around a blind corner, and he'd say, "It's all clear, come on," and everybody would pass blind, just because he said it was clear.
That was in the country too.
That was in Ukraine.
Ukraine, so where they bombed out roads?
No, they're just bad roads. Ukraine's also a developing country. Ukraine, those countries have only been out of the Soviet Union for, 30 years? 40 years? I'm not sure. But they've only been free countries with their own governments for the last 30 years or so. So they're just baby governments in, developing countries. So they have a lot of issues.
They're like the Lancasters, where they don't like pictures taken.
Well, that's a different reason. Actually, the people don't mind having their pictures taken. The military don't want their pictures taken for security reasons, because they don't want the Russians to know where they are and target them or target their families. The Amish in Lancaster, that's a religious thing. That's they don't want to be a spectacle. Anything else? I guess it's time to go to church. All right, thank you all.
See you,